We're down to Tom. Tom's going to talk about control and escape water hemp that almost every field has some amount of. So any tips and tricks are going to be helpful. So Tom, it's all yours.
And I'm gonna talk from the ground. So I don't want to go on that stage. I'm afraid I'm going to fall through. So I'm going to stay on the ground and walk around a little bit. So thank you, first of all, to Scott and to Mark for making the presentations. You both did an outstanding job. I don't know where Scott went. And he never did tell us what he would rather do, give a presentation or have a root canal. So the second thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge the two other names that are on this slide. So Alexa Leestead is my research specialist. So Alexa started as an undergrad student, then was a graduate student, and now is our research specialist, and she's done a tremendous amount of work and to support the program over the years. And then the other person is Dave Metler, and I don't know where he ran off to, but Dave just does a tremendous job with the Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar Co-op experiments. I will tell you this, if we had to run down here with our planter and make all the sprays, the quality of the data would be a lot less than what we get from David helping with us. So I especially am and grateful for what David does. And then the other thing I want to do before we start, I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to meet my friend Palmer over here. Palmer Amaranth. So the Soybean Council of North Dakota created a wire frame, and they had a 3D printer, and they simulated what Palmer would look like. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the only time you're going to get to see Palmer Amaranth. It's going to be a plastic plant, not the real thing. And more on that. We've worked very hard to keep it out of sugar beet ground, and I can tell you that as of today, we have one sugar beet grower that has had Palmer in North Dakota, Trail County, and it's not in a sugar beet field. It's on a different field. So we are really actively managing this. The board wants me to do some Palmer Amaranth work, and we're going to do that in 2024 just to make sure that we're prepared, that we have a program ready to go just in case something happens. So next slide, please. So I like to say that if I can start the year with 3 wishes, just 3 wishes, and I'm not greedy, I just want 3 things. The first thing is I want you to plant in April. Second, I want rainfall after you plant, because that pre-component really makes this program work. So getting pre on your planting to make the etho work is really critical to the program. And then the last thing is stands. We call that cultural control. A good stand is remarkable. And I want to use this field. This is one of Eric Branch and Peter Hawk's cooperators. This is near Foxhome, Minnesota. So if you look hard, you can see our lifters in the background. We were harvesting, and I was out looking at his fields. So the interesting thing is our cooperator couldn't plant the whole field. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a shelter belt. And there was a lot of snow in the shelter belt, and he got as close to the shelter belt as he could and then had to stop planting. And you can just see what happened, the delay in planting, the crappy stand, if you don't mind me saying that, and all the all of the water hemp that was in the field. So we didn't get any rain, so we didn't get any activation on the second. Our stands are bad, and of course we have water hemp control challenges. Next slide, please. So there's only a couple of things that I can guarantee. I can guarantee that you're going to have water hemp the first week of May 2024. So set your calendar for about the 5th of May, maybe by the 15th of May, but that's exactly when we're going to have water hemp. So operationally, we have to prepare for water hemp. Okay? And I think that's where planting early if we can, and getting our pre's activated is really critical to that. Please advance, please. Okay, so I like data, and this is some of your data. It's when you planted, and it's, if we click again, it'll be the average planting data in your co-op. And, you know, the interesting thing is, I just mentioned May 5th. So the data for 2023 says that it is possible that the day you planted sugar beets, the average plant day, we were already getting water hemp germination and emergence. And that didn't give us any, that didn't give us any buffer for getting it activated. Next slide. And then the other problem is getting timely rainfall. And I wish we had more control over rain, but we don't. So on the left is a U.S. map. We're going to focus in on our area. A U.S. map, and it's a May weather anomaly. So it compares May 2023, and then on the right side, June 2023, with some historical numbers. So green means it was wetter than normal. The yellows and oranges mean that it was drier than normal. And in this case, we were only getting about 25 to 50% of normal rainfall. That's not good for getting ethofumizate activated. That's just not very good at all. Next slide. Now, I can't zoom in any closer without just having a lot of garbage, but you can see for your area. And some of you got lucky. Some of you hooked a rain. But by the most part, we didn't get that timely rain to get our pre-working. That's one of the things I'm excited most about the new technology, is something that might be more reliable for getting those early water hemp seeds that germinate and emerge. Next slide. Okay. I'm going to review our program. And this is going to go quickly because I can tell you that nothing has changed. We don't have anything new. And then we're going to get into what Todd mentioned, more about the rescue part of the program. But I want to reinforce some things here. So the first line, dual magnum. Dual magnum is labeled in sugar beets pre, because we have a 24C local needs label. Dual magnum is the only product, the only S-metolachlor that you can use pre. So our rate range is 1/2 to 1 pint. The 1 pint is reserved for when we're planting late, after the 15th of May. That's more like a lay-by application than it is a pre-application. So maybe you get up to 0.75 on higher organic matter, fine and medium textured soils, but I don't want you to go greater than that. I am a former student of Alan Dexter, and I absolutely trust his instinct and his research, and that was that we can get injury from dual magnum under certain environmental conditions. Next line, ethyl. Ethyl alone, I'm not ready yet. Ethyl alone at 3 to 7.5 pints. Why such a wide range? Well, some of you have cover crops. And I can tell you that ethyl, especially when it gets activated, is going to be hard on cover crops. If you don't, well, then you can go full boat. You can go all the way up to the top. But the one I really like is the combination, dual magnum plus etho. So it's easier to activate dual magnum. It gives us 10 days to 14 days control, and then hopefully we get the rain. We've bought a little time to get the etho to activate. So that's the one that I try to promote the best. And then after that, it's the lay-by program, and I don't have any favorites there. My favorites are what works on your farm, and you ultimately decide what that is based on what you believe are risk factors on your farm. Next slide. Okay, so the playing field is starting to get a little complicated. So I wanted to spend a moment just to go through the various ethofumizate products that are out there. So there's a list of 5. So there's, of course, Nortron, Ethotron, ethofumizate 4SC, Nectron, and then there's a new one. There's a product now called Maxtron. And that product should be available in 2024 by Alba. Now, so I know we've got a bunch of industry guys here. Next slide, please. I'm not so sure about Nectron. I think maybe that one disappeared. Does anybody know if Farm Business Network is still active, and is ethofumizate 4SC still available? Does anybody know about that one? I got a head nod, so it's still there. Okay, good. Has anybody seen any Nectron? Okay, I don't think that's in the marketplace. So the other thing I want to say about Maxtron is it's a little different formulation. It's not as concentrated. So the full rate on that would be closer to 8 pints than the normal 7.5 that we have today. Next slide. Okay, so what about the chloroacetamides? So on your left-hand side is acetochlor, and there's a new one there. So the acetochlor product, is Warrant. And then below that is another encapsulated acetochlor product, and that's coming from the Corteva Agrisciences. So I don't know if this is going to make it into the marketplace or not in 2024. Anybody from Corteva here? It's not. So the answer, it is not. But it is coming. I did get that right. Okay. And then, of course, we have Outlook. On the right-hand side, so this is important to me. So there's S-metolachlor products and there are metolachlor products. And you need to keep those separated. So I get, a call or a note from time to time where somebody will say, hey, have you ever heard of this product? And most of the time it's one of these metolachlor products. And the giveaway is you can use it early post, or post on sugar beets. And I know something's not right, and it turns out to be one of those metolachlor products. The ones that I want you to pick from are on the sheet here. So to my knowledge, these are the only S-metolachlor products that are approved in sugar beets. Industry, did I get that right? Is anything missing? Okay, let's go. Next slide. Now, I told you that there wasn't a lot of new stuff here. There was an interesting experiment that we did this year that I want to talk about. So, it's pretty common in the spring that we're getting to our sugar beet stand, and an agriculturalist will call and they'll say, Peters, there's rain in the forecast. We want to spray our lay-by. What do you think? And I'll say, do you have a full stand? And the answer is, yeah, we got about a 180 count. And I said, then get your pre out there. Let's take a chance on it raining, get it out there. Put your outlook out. So we had an interesting experiment. Next slide. We had a site on the north end of the valley that was extremely dry, extremely dry. So we had, you might say, not even a half stand of sugar beets, but they were all at the 2 to 4 leaf stage. And we decided to spray our laybys. So you can see from the list, it's Outlook or Dual. So we had 2 different chloroacetamides. Fully knowing we didn't have a stand. Let's see what happens. And you can see from the data here, we did not get germination and emergence from those beets that had Outlook on it. And I don't think that's anything new. I mean, that's probably what we'd expect from Outlook or Warrant if we would have used those. It doesn't surprise me at all that we had better germination and emergence with Dual Magnum. But I thought this was really useful because I've always wondered what happens if you don't have a stand. So back to that agriculturalist question, I would encourage you, if you don't have a stand, you've got to wait. Just because some of our chloroacetamides have a possibility of affecting stand, especially if we get rain right after we make the application. Next slide. So I showed, the part of the experiment that was without a pre. There was also part of it that had a pre on it, so no pre and pre. So we had, better stands, but I would say the trend was still the same, that not having a full stand certainly hurt our overall stand when we applied the laybys. Next slide. Okay. I want to talk about our program. So this is 2 locations, Moorhead and Blomkest. And on the Moorhead side, again, a no pre and a pre. Our laybys were Outlook, Warrant, and Outlook, Warrant. So these are some of my favorite programs. And you can see at Moorhead, it didn't matter what we did. It didn't matter if we had a pre or no pre. We had over 95% control. Next slide. Blomkest, excuse me. So somebody said, well, you didn't have any weeds. That's why. That's why pre is the same as no pre. And the answer is, oh yes, we had weeds. If you can look carefully, you can see the Waterhemp coming. We had weeds. For some reason, some good reason, our post-treatment glyphosate and etho got the Waterhemp in that situation. Next slide. Now, looking at the Blomkest side, we didn't get any rain, we didn't get any control. The bottom line, and it's just like what Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, sometimes these programs don't work. And I'm up here to admit that they don't always work. Our programs, unfortunately, are predicated on getting rain on it. And there isn't really much we can do about that. Next slide. So, what I want to do with the rest of my time is talk about what are we going to do? What's going to be our program to try to clean up what didn't work because we didn't get timely rainfall? Next slide. So we have a lot of different things that we've put together over the years. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about our blazer work. I'm going to talk about electricity. I'm going to talk about cultivation. I'm going to talk about see and spray because that's coming up. Next slide. The first thing I want to say is if you have water hemp coming up, I don't care what the calendar date says, you have to get on it. Don't let water hemp get established. Small water hemp, even in May, is a lot easier to control than waiting until it's time to spray Roundup as part of the lay-by program. I believe that Roundup is still partially effective at getting some of these semi-resistant water hemp biotypes. Next slide. And we have some data that supports that. So we'll go out and count from time to time how many plants that we have per unit area. And this was work that we did at multiple locations over a 3-year period of time. And what it says is that we got about 75% control from our Roundup Etho program. Now, if we made a repeat application, we didn't get any more control. But it tells me that especially small water hemp still is partially controllable with Roundup. So the first option would be consider Roundup Etho, go with full rates, add ammonium sulfate like Scott said, maybe add an adjuvant on top. Next slide. Cultivation. I am a big believer in cultivation. I think cultivation integrated with the post-emergence lay-by program should be part of everybody's arsenal. And judging by the survey, it looks like a lot of you believe the same thing. Next slide. So we get questions sometimes about configuration, how deep we should go, how fast we should travel, and I will say that field conditions really dictate the answers to those questions. Sweeps are fine, tines are fine. I don't think the tines handle residue as well. I know the tines don't handle bigger water hemp as well. The water hemp has a habit of working its way through the tines. Next slide. One thing. The cultivator is not going to activate your herbicides. So don't go out and cultivate thinking, well, I'll get these darn things activated. That doesn't work. We learned that in a thesis. Next slide. Now, one thing that I hear from time to time is it's a bad thing to mix cultivation with sugar beets because you throw soil and that causes rhizoc challenges. And maybe it did 20 or 30 years ago. But I think I know our varieties are a lot better today. And plus we have Quadris. Some of you use Quadris. And I think those combinations make it a whole different picture than what it used to be. So this was a study. We went out and cultivated at different time points. So we had corn stalk residue at Southern Min. We had soybean residue in Mindac, and we had wheat residue in Crystal Sugar. And this data is averaged together because it didn't matter what the previous crop was. It also didn't matter when we cultivated. Sugar was the same, recoverable sucrose was the same. So I don't want you to be worried about cultivating. Cultivation should be part of your program. Next slide. So Emma just left. So you know that Miss Emma Burt did her master's degree working on Ultra Blazer. So she worked from 2019 to 2021, and we've continued some of her work. We've been trying to make this thing work. So I think we've completed that chapter. So I'm going to summarize what we've learned from our experiences with Ultra Blazer. First thing is, does Ultra Blazer control water hemp? The answer is it controls some of the water hemp. Okay? In Emma's work, we didn't see 90% control from Ultra Blazer alone on Waterhemp. Certainly it's better than our Roundup check, but it didn't give us complete control. We did better when we mixed Roundup with Ultra Blazer. Second question, does Ultra Blazer bronze beets? Absolutely it does. And you can see that. This is one of her earlier experiments. You can see that. Next slide. Our biggest Achilles heel with Blazer has been regrowth, especially on bigger water hemp. So some growers will say, Peters, I can take the bronzing, but you got to kill those darn water hemp or I can't use this program. And again, water hemp has so many different growing points, it's hard, especially on bigger water hemp, to get those growing points. So over the years, we've done everything we can think of. We've used different nozzles, we've used more water. We just haven't been successful with this program. Next slide. We even went back to using oils. And you can see from the picture, bottom picture, left-hand side, we just have too much injury. We're just setting these back too far. We tried splitting the Ultra Blazer. Now we have less necrosis, but instead of 10 days, we have it for 3 weeks. That's not good either. Our answer, I said earlier that we needed to mix Roundup with Ultra Blazer. And I'll say this and I'll say it again. I think the switch to Roundup Power Max 3, especially when it was combined with Ultra Blazer, made that a hotter program and hotter on sugar beets. And unfortunately, we just haven't been able to overcome that hump. Next slide. So we've been doing experiments. We wanted to prove it to ourselves. This is from 22. Top line, Ultra Blazer. Second line, Power Max plus Ultra Blazer. Third line, Power Max control. We looked at necrosis, growth reduction, sucrose, and recoverable sucrose. So you can see Ultra Blazer is similar statistically to Power Max. However, that program didn't get all the weeds. We add the Power Max in and we have a yield loss, a statistical yield loss. We don't affect sugar, but we have more vegetative injury, and then we have the loss in root yield and recoverable sucrose. Next slide. Let's try it in 2023, the same result. I would argue that we even had more injury in 2023. So I don't know what else to do with Ultra Blazer. I think, and we will continue to file a Section 18 on Ultra Blazer until they get it fully approved. I'm going to recommend for most situations that it's Ultra Blazer alone with NIS. And only under those extreme conditions we mix in the Roundup. It's just too hot, and our yield data backs it up. Next slide. Okay, electricity. So we've dabbled a little bit with electricity, and we had a unique circumstance this year where we had a chance to look at it again. So just to familiarize everybody, the Weed Zapper is what's available now. It's manufactured in Missouri. It brings a lot more killing capacity than the original Zapper from the 70s and 80s. It takes a lot of horsepower. And even with all that horsepower and that big engine, that big generator, we still can overheat these. They've made dramatic improvements in safety. And in my opinion, how fast you drive is really dependent on how much weed pressure that you have. The way these machines work is the electricity that you generate in the back goes through this copper bar, and when the water hemp touches these, it's a series of explosions that are occurring as the temperature change from the electricity blows up the vascular bundles that are in the plants. So we immediately see wilting. What's different from field to field is how far that electricity will travel, and how we measure that as necrosis. So how much necrosis are you going to get in the stem and the leaves in the top, the middle, and the bottom? Next slide. So this is some data from one of my students in 2020. So the bar colors refer to how many passes that you make. And one thing that I wish we would have changed is today the way the guys are using the weed zapper is they'll go out and they'll use it and then maybe come back in 5 or 7 days. We did it all at the same time. So the black bar, the dark blue bar is one pass down the field. Yellow is down and back. And then the gray one is down, back, down and back, all at the same time. So you can see, maybe there's a little bit of benefit 3 to 7 days from the more passes, but by and large, we have the same result. I think what the guys are doing today probably makes more sense, where they temporally separate when the weed zapper is used in fields. Next slide. Okay, so this is from 2023. So I call this Bloomquist at Bloomcast. So Mark went out and took some data for me, and if you look really hard, there's a couple of things that you'll see. You'll see that wilting phenotype in water hemp. So I was out there 15 minutes after they finished the field, and it was already wilted. The other thing that's interesting, picture top on the right, the sugar beets are already kind of darkened from that application. Boy, did that happen fast, where they touched the beets. Next slide. So Mark went out and took some more data. So he took data 5, 8, and 12 days after application. So the first thing he did is measured the control, some weeds that were along the edge of the field. So by and large, those weeds didn't grow much. And then he went out and looked to see how far did that necrosis, that burn, extend in the main stem down the plant. And it was all in that, 10, maybe 11, maybe a little better than 11-inch range. We didn't get probably as far as we would have liked or as far that was needed, because you can see in the notes section we started to get some regrowth, and that occurred over time. And I think that's one of the Achilles heels with the weed zappers. If you take the top off, the water hemp is programmed to start growing from underneath. So just like Palmer over there, those lower leaves are very capable of making seed and proliferating the growth of the plant. Next slide. And here's some pictures, control on top, and then over time you can see the more of the bronzing. You can also start to see some regrowth that's occurring on the 11 and 12 day after treatment picture, August 11th, 12 days after. Next slide. I'll say this, though, and this is important. One thing that has been consistent with the weed zapper is it does a pretty good job of preventing the formation of viable seed. So you may not be killing plants, you might have some competition loss, but you can see with water hemp, we're getting between 60 and 70% less seed production that's made. And I think that's really important. Next slide. Hand weeding. I was really impressed with the survey today. A lot of you are hand weeding, and I think that's really a good thing. What's really impressive to me about the Southern Min data is, and you're the black bars, and this is from last year's survey. So from 0 to 10 to 50 to 100 to greater than 100, it's about equally spread out. So I'm really happy to see that everybody is bought in on hand weeding to keep these water hemp from making viable seed. So hand weeding is done in all of the cooperatives and all of the factory districts. I think you can see that it's more of a spot treatment that occurs in fields where people go into the most severe portions and focus there. Next slide. Process check. How are we doing, Todd? Am I okay? Okay, we're right on time. So I want to spend a couple of minutes with See and Spray. So I'm sure you've all read about See and Spray. I'm really impressed and excited. I hope to be able to work with this system. So I want to just kind of summarize what's going on right now. So they're collecting a ton of imagery. To make the See and Spray work in sugar beets, they have to have pictures of sugar beets at different growth stages, in different residue conditions, in different light conditions, in every other variable that you can think of that I didn't think of, so that when this machine passes over, it can make a decision as to if it should squirt or if it should keep going. So that imagery captures the reason why sugar beet is behind corn and soybean. They just don't have all the imagery that they need. So that's going to happen pretty quickly. So the soybean guys are saying, well, we're going to use See and Spray. We're going to go out and spray our favorite herbicide. I was going to say Liberty, but I was corrected on that, so we're not going to spray Liberty off label. We're going to use whatever is in the program that's available. It's a little more complicated in sugar beets. What are we going to do? What are we going to use? And as far as I'm concerned, if this is going to be available in 2026, we better start figuring that out. What are we going to use in this program? Because I don't really know. Are we going to use Blazer? How about Paraquat? Just kill a little area. So do we have the appropriate labels to do those kinds of things? We have 2 years to figure this out. We have to be ready for when this technology is available. Next slide. I'm going to skip this because I want to go to the next slide, the last slide, and I want to get some help from Mark on this. So, and this was supposed to be a build slide. So I'm going to go through this. I want to make sure you're all aware of what the Endangered Species Act is about. So this has been in the news a lot. My Weed Science Society has been working on this. Mark, through the Beet Development, is working on this. The Growers Association is. So what's going on? So I'm going to read these off. I'm going to get over here and just read to you. What is the Endangered Species Act? Well, the government is required to take an assessment of species that are threatened or endangered, and this outcome is an opinion, a paper which determines if the proposed action could cause adverse effects to any listed species. Okay? Bullet number 2. How does ESA affect herbicides? The short answer is it does. It does. EPA oversees pesticide use. Pesticides, including herbicides, can affect animals and plants and trigger this assessment that's done. Bullet number 3. Why are we hearing about this now? And I'll say it has nothing to do with the political party that's in office. What it has to do with EPA. EPA is tired of getting sued. So what they currently do is they don't do an endangered species consultation. They just figure that they can handle these on a case-by-case situation. What they're going to do is to change that approach. So what may change? Well, our labels may change. And this is for all of them. So you've seen this already with dual enlist and dicamba. There's a lot of special information that's in those labels. And what I envision is that kind of approach. So different points that you get for complying by certain things are going to be the foundation with a lot of other labels as well. Why does complying matter to agriculture? EPA has realized that having pesticide registrations that are always facing lawsuits does not benefit agriculture. It just delays things. And then finally, does agriculture have a vote? And the answer is yes. And that's where I want Todd to come in. The Weed Science Society has been very much involved in this. And I'm sure other groups have as well. So there's 3 things that I've been thinking about a lot with this. First of all, should we be protecting endangered species? And my vote is yes. I think we probably should. Second, and this is my first problem, is I don't know that we know where they are, what they are, or where they are. So they're currently relying on some databases that I think are very much dated. So the first thing I'd like to see them do is try to figure out what endangered species are in Minnesota and where exactly are they at. And then the last thing, this enlist approach, so using a product that was broadly used in a lot of states, I don't think that's the best approach. I think this has to be a little more of a boutique approach, more craft approach, where depending on the pesticide, depending on the crop, that they try to attack and determine what these new labels will look like. Todd, I want you to weigh in too, because you've been pretty active in this, and I think your opinion is important.
So I've been working on this through the Beet Sugar Development Foundation, along with some other people in the room. So this is definitely going to impact how we operate in agriculture. There's going to be places in the country, or maybe in our growing area, for sure in our growing area, where you cannot spray certain herbicides. And there's going to be a buffer around that place where you cannot spray herbicides. And really what the Beet Sugar Development Foundation sent in a 77-page document trying to get some rationale into this whole strategy that the EPA came up with. The main thing is, well, in simple terms, it's the government and they're here to help, right? Doesn't mean they have common sense. Doesn't mean they think things through. But I'll say this, it's going to impact every product that we use. We just got done with it's called the herbicide strategy. Like I said, we sent in a 77-page document. There's a rodenticide strategy that's currently out. I think we're sending in a document on that too, aren't we, Tyler? There's going to be an insecticide strategy. Now just think about it. You're trying to protect an endangered insect. You know, weeds are one thing because weeds don't move around. Do insects stay put?
No.
New challenges, right? You think the labels might be even more restrictive there? Probably. I don't know. I haven't seen what it looks like yet, but it's going to be very challenging. Same with fungicides. We're going to have a fungicide strategy that we're going to have to try and adopt. So this is going to be a significant frustration as we go down the way through this. I'll tell you, there's lots of groups, not just sugar beets, but everybody, trying to make sure that at the end of the day, the rules that come out are actually rules that we can follow and can use and can do what we want them, what they want them to do, and what we need them to do. So we'll keep trying, but I'm going to guarantee you every product, 10 years from now, I'm just going to say 10 years, every product you spray in your field will have some kind of an endangered species section, which will require you to look up information on the web to see whether or not you can use the product where you want to. That's just going to be the new facts of life as far as I can see them.
I want to add one point, Todd. This is not just about the existing pesticides, but it's about future pesticides as well. So my opinion is EPA is not going to do anything with these new products, some of which we've been talking about today, until they figure out a strategy for the established ones.
That's an excellent point. So that's just going to slow down the whole process of getting new active ingredients out to you guys. So that's what we're facing, and there's significant efforts going on to try and keep things going, but it's going to be a challenge.
Any comments? Maybe since Todd still has the mic, anything anybody wants to add about ESA?
Mike. So the question is...
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question is, so the EPA is under the impression they're going to have less lawsuits if they implement these ESA rules. Is that fair? So let's back up a second. The lawsuits that they've been getting aren't from the agriculture side. They're from all the environmental groups, right? And then so they just got tired of being sued, and so finally they said, well, we're going to have to jump in and figure out the new rules to do this. Is there a likelihood that at some point the ag community is going to be suing the EPA back because the rules are crazy? I'm going to say that's probably going to happen.
I think it's happened before.
Yeah. But hopefully we can we're at the front end of the rulemaking now, and hopefully we can get some rational thought into it before they gets to be the final rules. Does that make sense?
Yes, except I'm looking at it more like, do they believe the environmental now is less because they implemented the program?
I think that they do believe that because, what happens every time they make a rule, they go out for comments, because there's a whole process for this, and all the environmental groups have the ability of putting comments too. The EPA has to take those into consideration when they make the rules. So there's a process, hopefully, that will help minimize that.
And I'd add to that, Mike, I don't think EPA goes out and does some of this assessment work that by law they were supposed to do. So they've been ignoring that portion of it. So what they're saying, we're going to start following what the law says, that we should do this.
A lot of those assessments, by the way, aren't done by the EPA, but they're done by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and those kinds of agencies.
Yeah. Good add. Anybody else? Question? So the question is about the seed treatment rules that are coming about in the state of Minnesota. I can absolutely tell you that we are neck deep in dealing with that also.
There's also one at the federal level that we're neck deep in. I'm looking at Tyler because I know Tyler's even deeper in it than me by a long shot. So we absolutely are on top of those. There's a whole laundry list of these kinds of things that we are working through, both at the state and federal level. We work through the Beet Sugar Development Foundation on the federal level, and our job is to make sure the rules are actually usable at the end for the grower. And then on the state level, the one beauty of sugar beets, we're super organized. I referenced Mike earlier, Mike Metzger, he's my counterpart at Mindak. I know all the guys up at Crystal. We know what's going on together. So we're on these kinds of things, we're all working together for sure. Good question. Anything else? Questions for Tom? Well, we got him in front of the group.
Let's go back to water hemp. Anything about water hemp? And I know I've talked about this a lot over the years, but it's our most important weed. I think that's why it deserves a stage. Any questions about water hemp? Sir? Excellent question. So, remind me of your first name. Tom. Tom's question is, does the cultivator screw up the lay-by? Does it mess up the barrier? And the answer is it can. So in Nathan's work, we had multiple experiments in multiple environments. In one environment, we completely stimulated the development of another flush of water hemp. And part of the reason for that is we had a lot of rain and we sprayed in an open canopy. So most of the time this is sort of like Mark said, to close. In that case, we had to do something because of the weed pressure we had. So maybe the workaround, Tom, would be maybe consider playing that cultivator card between the first and second lay-by application. And, the weeds are maybe smaller, so they're easier to get at that stage. And then it gives us another chance with the second spray in the event that we have conditions for germination and emergence. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I'll paraphrase and say, are there any constraints in the glyphosate labels about how much you can use, what the maximum spray would be, and what the maximum in-season amount would be? And the answer is absolutely. Check your pocket guide. We have that very well detailed in the glyphosate section of the pocket guide. But no, there are label maximums depending on what formulation you're using, and we need to abide by those rules. Absolutely. So I'll say this. Part of my problem with herbicides is the only truly sugar beet tolerant herbicide that I've ever used is Roundup. And you're right, Tom. You can use much, or your friend is right. I won't blame you. Tom's friend is right that there is a tremendous amount of tolerance built in. But that doesn't mean we can make off-label applications. Other questions? Other questions? There's got to be more questions about water hemp. Sir?
This summer at the meeting, you touched on the potential for warrant to safe in the Ultra Blazer.
Yeah.
Do you have any more data on that?
I do. So the question is what happens if we add warrant into that second lay-by application that's Roundup plus Ultra Blazer? Will the warrant safeten the Ultra Blazer effect? And the answer is yes, it does. But it also safens water hemp control. So, I was thinking about this, and I haven't talked about Mark yet. I don't want to play those kinds of games. We're using warrant because it's our second lay-by application. Let's keep it focused to what it's for, rather than playing these games that may or may not work. So while the water hemp control data is interesting, I'll say that too. While the sugar beet safety data is interesting, I don't want to go there with that program. So we're not going to further investigate that. Cody, question. Three laybys. So as part of the Palmer Amaranth strategy, we can make an application of a chloroacetamide, I think as late as the 10 and 12 leaf application. I know we can do that with dual magnum. How about on the Outlook label? How late can we go? Oh, it's PHI, that's right. But we could spray potentially 12 leaf beets, right? Not with Outlook? Okay. Okay, so let's just, I didn't want to, I wanted to, I know with Palmer, with dual magnum that we can make a later application. Now here's the thing, we still have to abide by their maximum amount that you can use post-emergence. But I'm going to investigate that this season, starting with PA.
Well, and my question is 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and then maybe 6 to 8.
Okay, 2 to 4, 6, 2 to 4, say that again.
1 and 2 to 4, 1 and 4 to 6, and 1 and 6 to 8.
Okay, so where's David? David, we tried that once before. 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8. And it seemed like all we were doing was spraying, right? I don't know. I'm not there on that one at all. I don't think there's enough time. I think I am interested in the later spray, though, and I think that's what we'll take a look at. Anybody else?
Looks like we're going to have perfect weed control with water hemp this year, Tom.
Let's set
We
that as a
answered all
goal.
the questions.
Pray for rain.
Pray for rain.
Timely rain. Timely rain.
Timely rain. All right, if there's no more questions for Tom, how about a hand of applause for Tom?